Hey folks, Segasonicfan here, and today I'm going to show you how to install a virtual ribbon. This video has been a long time coming, and I'm about to ship the entire first batch of pre-orders, which I'm very excited about, and I think people receiving the boards will be excited about. But the one thing I have said on the website, in the forum posts, in my emails repeatedly, is that this is a difficult install. It's quite difficult. I've been soldering for about 16 years now, and I would say you need 10 years of soldering experience to effectively install this PCB that I've designed. Now, some people might be able to do it without that much experience. You know, I can't say one way or the other, but that's sort of my recommendation. It's a bit of a tricky install, even for me as the person who designed it and has all the necessary tools. So that leads me to believe that some of you out there may struggle with it. And so I do recommend having an install service doing it for you. I might still offer that for a little bit longer, although I'm trying to get away from doing installs right now. But yes, I highly recommend really having a lot of experience under your belt or having an install service do this. If you do this yourself and follow the instructions of this video, you can do your best and everything, but I'm not responsible for any damage to your system. You can very much so break your Virtual Boy if you don't know what you're doing or if you don't have the necessary experience. So that's my warning to all of you. I've said it many times. I don't want to see people breaking their systems out there. So that I'll keep saying the same disclaimer over and over again. Do this at your own risk. And without further ado, I'll go into what the tools are, what I recommend the tools are. Now, everyone's got their own way of soldering and their own tools for sure, so you don't have to have all these if you think there's something better, but this is what I use, this is what I find works extremely well, and I strongly recommend what I'm going to share in this video. So, first things first, we have to focus on ventilation and safety. Especially on the West Coast here, the air quality is not so great. And so what I've got here is a carbon filter fan that's going to be a fume extractor. It's going to absorb our solder fumes. This is the 493. You can find these. They're made in Shenzhen. They're quite inexpensive. And I'm also, it's off camera, but to the right, I'm actually going to be running a Hepa filter, which is quite useful. And it's the LEVOIT brand. I don't know how to pronounce that, but I do like this Hepa filter. And I'm going to be using some industrial nitrate gloves. These are really good for handling chemicals and synthetic materials. So, and then if you want, you can, of course, wear an N95 mask or a respirator of some sort. Since I'm going to be running these fans, I'm not going to be doing that. And because I also want you all to hear me while I'm making this video. So I'm not going to be doing that part of it, but I'm going to be doing everything else. So I'm going to do a little bit of an equipment rundown of everything that I'm using here and let you know what it is and why I'm using it. I'll start with the LED lights here, actually. These work lights are fantastic. And you might just say, well, it's just an LED light. These are extremely bright, and having really good bright lights on your workbench are very helpful. These are very cheap right now, about 15, 20 bucks. And you'll see I got two of them here. I've got a third actually over here that's an older model that I've actually upgraded. And additionally, I've even got a UV lamp off to the left. So I've got a lot of lighting. I really am a big fan of having good lighting in my workspace. Additionally, I've got a digital microscope here, which I'll try to pan up to show you all. The ADSM 302, I believe, is the model of this. And this is a fantastic piece of tech, hardware for repair, and I can't recommend it enough. Really fantastic. I've got a teardown video of it on my YouTube page, and it's going to really help these installs a lot. So if you don't have one, you're going to struggle a bit more than from those of you that do have a digital microscope. However, if you don't have one, you can go the real cheapo method, which is you can get one of these. The cool thing about these is they're about $2. They're very, very cheap. And I think they do about 30x. Is it 10x or 30x? I think it's 30x. So they're quite good. and very necessary for doing these installs. The other thing that is very helpful for these installs, though not as necessary as one of those, is having a magnifying headset. And I'll show you the one that I have. Let me go see if I can grab the box. These are about 15 bucks. And I'll tell you, it's some of the best 15 bucks I've ever spent. Get yourself one of these. Yeah, they go to 3.5x, and I only use the 3.5x. But these magnifying headsets, I've actually upgraded and modified mine. I use this all the time. Mine's actually been upgraded with a lithium-ion battery pack, and I've even upgraded it to have a USB charger built in, so I never have to worry about changing out AAA batteries. And it's also lighter weight now with the lithium-ion, so it doesn't put as much weight on the bridge of my nose. The PCB that's in here for this, by the way, you can purchase off my website. That's my lithium-ion charge PCB. And this works great. I also am using the headband attachment. Mine actually broke like a couple years back, so I came up with this hack to fix it, which surprisingly has held up. But, you know, you can just buy another one as well. I have 2 of them that I've modified now. So that's where we are as far as lighting, visual optics. Those are the things that you need. Now for the soldering part of it, well, actually, first I'll talk about cleaning just really quick. You're going to want yourself a lot of Q-tips. Now, you can use the fancier foam cleaners that they have on the market now, which don't leave any like hair, any little strands of lint, which are these guys. And they're nice, but they're not necessary for this modification. So you can go with the cheap Q-tips and you'll be fine, but you will need a fair number of them. Fortunately, you can get a whole box of Q-tips like this for $2.99. The other thing that you'll definitely want to have is some isopropyl alcohol. This is 91% isopropyl alcohol. You can get these at your local drugstore, usually about $2, $3 at the most, maybe $5. And what I do is I actually also get these little containers, and you'll see this one's labeled IPA for isopropyl alcohol. You can get these online. They do take a while to ship to you. But if you go to your hardware store, I got this at Ace Hardware, you can get these little eyedroppers, maybe at a drugstore as well. And these are very, very helpful for holding that isopropyl alcohol, so you don't have to keep going back to that large container all the time. I find it to be very helpful. Next up, that's it for cleaning, I believe. And next up, we'll talk about the soldering. Now, for soldering itself, I'm using a Weller WESD51 soldering station. Let's see if I can pull it on camera here, because the base station is off camera. I do somewhat swear by this station. I've used it for a very long time. Let me try to pan over to this. So this is the soldering station that I use. It's got a digital display with a control dial. They do make budget versions of this nowadays out of China that are much cheaper, and people swear by them. I haven't tried one out yet, but I do swear by the WESD51 because I've had mine. Gosh, I've had mine for I have 2 of them now, but I've had one since 2005, something like that. So over 15 years, and it's you know, you replace the actual wand once in a while, but aside from that, it keeps going strong. And so this is the wand. It's a nice lightweight wand. This is the PES51 wand. And I highly, highly recommend getting a chisel tip. Let me show you what that looks like under the microscope here. This is the kind of tip that you want. Flat chisel tip. Very important. Very important. Your work's going to be a lot harder here if you don't have a flat chisel tip. Lastly, you'll need a couple ways to clean your soldering iron. I use just a Hakko brass mesh. I forget what this stuff is called. It's something like a brass mesh stuff. And that cleans the tip pretty well. And I also have tip tinner. This stuff is great. It's about $10 and it will last you years. I mean, I've had this for 8 months and you can see I'm not even halfway through it. Really, really helpful for making sure you don't oxidize your tip and it lasts longer and gets better better dissipation for both solder and heat. By the way, some of this stuff I learned from a really cool channel, a cool series of YouTube videos from The Art of Repair. They have some pretty good videos on tools, so that's an option if you want to check that out. And for solder, I believe this is a 6040 core solder. It's kind of standard stuff. This is 23 gauge. I do find this to be one of my favorite gauges. I have some smaller stuff that I use for really precise SMD work, but 23 gauge works quite well for almost all the work that I do. And it does have flux in it, and that also helps too. Also, you're going to need some wick. You're definitely going to need some wick for this job. Goot wick is really awesome stuff because it's actually got flux within the wick itself, and it's extremely helpful. The width of it is not super important. You can go with the 2.5 millimeters or something, or sorry, the 1.5 millimeters or smaller, and that'll be very useful later on in the work that I'm going to do here. And of course, you're going to need liquid flux. Absolutely going to need a liquid flux for this job. You cannot do it without it. What I recommend actually is the Chipquik brand. This is really good stuff, but it's quite a bit more expensive, so I don't use it unless I'm doing some really important SMD work. For these kind of jobs, it's actually not necessary to have the best quality flux. You can get away with this, which is actually the NC-559-ASM. It's actually a like China-made knockoff, so it's not actually NC-559 quality. It is it does leave a residue, but it's pretty good stuff. And in fact, there's not a huge difference between these two. This one just has a little more cleanup involved, but you do need a syringe liquid flux, absolutely necessary for this work. All right, and then lastly, we're going to need screwdrivers, of course, and this is to remove the screws within the Virtual Boy. This is actually a nice compact driver for the Craftsman, of course, and you can, I do recommend a small hand driver for removing that screw, because you're going to be doing that a couple times through the course of this install, and that's the screw that holds on the LED PCB. And the goal, of course, you're going to get a kit that's going to look like this. It's going to have all the boards, the cable inside, and when you first solder your connector on, it's going to look like that. And I guess I'll go over that. I'll try to find, see if I have a board left. It doesn't have a connector on it that I've already prepared. But the boards look quite like this. Pretty simple. There's 4 boards, 2 sets, or sorry, 1 set. Sorry, no, 2 sets. Yeah, 2 sets. Hello. And the goal is, at the end of everything, to have it look like this. All nicely installed, and it has that nice 90-degree angle. And I'll show you, if I can, later on video, what that's going to be like. And so these 2 sets are totally finished. They're very, very sturdy. And I'm going to set them aside. I just wanted to show them to you so you know what the goal is that we have here. Through the course of this video, I think it'll become a little more clear why I went for the design route that I did and the improvements that it has. So let's see. What else do we need before we get started? I'll turn on the fan shortly, so there'll be a little bit of noise from that. But I'm going to go here and open up 2 displays that someone has sent me. And I've got another video, which I may or may not finish uploading soon here, about the quality difference between the original Virtual Boy cable and the new one that I'm providing. And I don't know if you can tell on camera, but it's a significant bump in quality. The thickness of the material, its resistance to heat and pliability, it's way, way better. And one of the reasons I went with the 90-degree angle as well is when it's installed, your cable looks like an S, like that. And this is how flat flex cables should function when you're moving along the x-axis. So the x-axis moves like that when you adjust the eyepiece. And so as you can see, there's actually going to be a level there. It's not putting undue strain, unnecessary strain on the PCB connector or on the PCB board itself. It's the flat flex cable that's already, just sort of accommodating that motion. Now, with the original design, you don't have that. With the original design, it just plugs in here, and you see how that's pushing. It's actually pushing the connection off of the PCB when you bend it like that. And so when you're sliding the eyepiece, you're doing that. And what you're doing is slowly, very, very slowly, tearing away the connector from the PCB itself. Any repair that uses this method is going to be less durable because you're putting that strain on your ribbon cable. There's no way around it. You can glue it like Nintendo did. They put glue on the back and on the front here. But at the end of the day, you're constantly giving it that strain whenever you move the piece. And so that's the reason why I really, really prefer, and why I spent all the extra work designing this as a 90-degree repair, a 90-degree board, is because this is actually how things really should be done if you're doing a lateral force like that on the x-axis. Okay. So let's also get out our Virtual Boy. You're going to need your actual Virtual Boy console to test the PCBs as you put them in. They are actually designed very carefully to the Virtual Boy spec so that it fits within the plastic frame of the LED segment piece. And I will go over that maybe as we get closer, further in the repair. But here's a Virtual Boy. Obviously, you had to open this up to send me your eyepieces, those of you that did. But you will need, there are videos on how to open up your unit. And I will link you in the description to those videos. I don't want to go into too much detail about that. Basically, you need an external line head screw adapter. They are special security screws, and you have to buy a special screwdriver for that. I think they're like $8, $8 to $10. They're not super expensive. And if you have, you can do it by hand, of course, using something like this, and then you put the bit in there. But the important part is you need a really long one. A lot of the ones for Super Nintendo or other Nintendo systems, you'll see here I even had to sand mine down a little bit to get into some of the deep recesses because some of those screws are really deep in there. So something to be aware of. I would just recommend buying one that's made specifically for Virtual Boy. Once you have the bottom off, what you want to do is desolder the two speakers. There's 2 wires for each speaker, and you just put your soldering iron there and just remove them. That's going to make life a lot easier when you're doing this install, as it will become apparent later. The other thing I did too is you can actually remove these eyepieces or put a piece of masking tape to just hold them in place because they will fall out otherwise. I decided to keep them in because I want to protect as much as I can contaminants coming into the mirrors. If you get dust and other stuff into those oscillating mirrors, it could affect your display as well. And if you want to later, you can go in with some canned air and blow that out a little bit, or clean it with a lint-free cloth as well. But I wouldn't recommend the cloth as much. I would go more for the compressed air route. And I'll just show you kind of what we're going for here before we get into it, is you will actually match up the original LED display into this black frame here, and you'll align the PCB first. Then you'll solder it like one or 2 points to hold it in place. Then you'll remove this and finish the install of this PCB before putting it back in and doing the second PCB. And we'll go through that together. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of what to expect kind of thing. Okay, so moving along, let's start by actually removing the original cabling that's on our displays. Now you'll see this customer actually sent me one with tape, some Scotch tape around the display, and no surprise that did not work as a repair. So I'm just going to peel that off. We have our cable. What's really interesting too is if you look at it, they don't look broken, you know, when you just glance at it. And this is the other thing that's a little frustrating about these. When they do break, you have no visual indicator other than your display itself, which you have to assume is this ribbon cable. But you don't usually see like an actual crack or anything like that because it's not soldered. It's not actually soldered to this board. It's using an adhesive. Very, 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 just not the best design. Let's put it that way. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and turn on my fans here. So you hear a little bit of noise from that. I've got my iron right now set to 720 degrees Fahrenheit. Make sure everything is right over. And what we're going to do is I'm going to apply a fair amount of flux across this, maybe 1 or 2 beads. And I'm going to heat it up from the copper pads down here. I'm going to try to get my iron in this area while very gently pulling up on the ribbon cable, moving along, pulling up, moving along, pulling up, moving along, pulling up, till I get the full cable off. The important thing here is you don't want to damage these traces. So you want to get everything pretty hot, and you don't want to, when you pull up this ribbon cable, it should require almost no force at all. It should be very, very easy to pull up. And that way you know that you're not actually pulling up traces, you're pulling up this really thin cable, and the heat is dissolving the adhesive, essentially. Now, some of you might argue there are better ways to do this. If you want to do a different way, be my guest. I'm doing it this way because I don't think using a hot air gun, which I have over there, is appropriate for this. I think it's actually a really bad idea because you have this part on the back, which is quite fragile, and it has a bunch of microscopic wires in here that are actually connecting this large vertical LED, which is an LED array, actually. You really, really don't want to damage this piece. You don't want to get flux anywhere near this. You don't want to get heat anywhere near this. That's your goal to keep in mind. Additionally, another thing to keep in mind, let me see if I can zoom in here a little bit. Additionally, one thing you might want to be a little mindful of, and here I'll show you again, this is where we're trying to heat up, is along this area. So additionally, these holes here and here are actually plated. What that means is there's metal on the inside rings of both of these holes. So you want to ideally not get flux or solder into those holes because they will actually get clogged and you'll have to remove it. Not the end of the world. That's part of what our Goot Wick is for. But if you can avoid it on first pass, it sure would be nice. So what we're going to do is get some, again, we're going to get some, actually I'll just start doing it right now. Put some flux, just maybe 2 beads like that. Just a really thin layer, like so. Let's see if my camera can autofocus a little better here. No, it's not happy. I guess I can't really do the zoom in. But anyway, you'll get about that much going. Alright, so, and what I'm also going to do is apply solder to tin the pads, and apply, and which will also increase the, it also helps with the heat dissipation a little bit as the solder moves on to the traces, which is the pads, essentially, traces, pads. The traces are the pads, which is the connector here, essentially. So let's see if I can do this with the camera staying in focus if I zoom in. I'll do my best here for you. Make a little bit more space here. Okay, so now I got a little bit on the corner there, and I'm just going to put my soldering iron down here and just gently, you know, I'll put a little bit on the edge of the cable. You can actually start melting the cable if you want to. Sometimes you'll have to clean up some of the remaining cable, but that's okay. And you'll see here as I'm going along the bottom, just gently, you don't have to apply a lot of pressure with your iron, but sometimes you do need to hold it for some time to get the heat going underneath this ribbon. And just go very, very slow. Everything with this upgrade is patience. Patience is everything with these kind of small repairs and upgrades. This one's coming up with a little bit more force too, because the glue actually is still functioning in the back, which is kind of amazing. Most of them, that glue bites the dust. And you'll see here towards the end, I'm trying to stay away from that large opening. I don't want to clog that with solder. All right, so that wasn't too bad. And you'll see now it's cable's mostly all off. The next step is I'm going to go ahead and put another bead of flux. I'll get used to fluxing stuff doing this. And I'm going to put a lot of solder, and I'm trying to evaporate all the adhesive there. And this is why ventilation is really important, because this is toxic stuff. But I'm trying to evaporate all the adhesive that's in there, as well as tin the pads. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my Q-tips and my alcohol ready, because if you clean up flux quickly, it comes up a lot easier with the Q-tips than if you wait even 30 seconds. So I've got the alcohol and the Q-tip ready. Let's see if I can move the camera down here a little more. And you know, the camera's not liking my hand there is the problem. If I do it like that. And I just do little circular motions. Little light, very, very light. You don't want to damage the pads, the traces. Those long traces there. And you just do circular motions. You'll see all the smoke coming up from the adhesive and the flux. And kind of keep moving as things get that nice silvery tin there. Very nice. And the glob of solder that's left, you just use your brass stuff, your Hacko brass stuff, to remove that. And this is actually a little bit easier with the magnifying glass, but I'm trying not to use that because that way I can show you all with the camera. The other thing to do after this is I go through and I kind of just brush it like a painter to really flatten it out, because you want it to be tinned and very, very flat so that the new PCB will rest snugly there. Next, I'm going to take my isopropyl alcohol and I'm going to do some nice swabs. And usually I have to use at least one full Q-tip just for this part. You'll see how nasty that gets. Just cleaning up all the adhesive and the flux. Again, be somewhat gentle. You don't want to damage the pads, but they're not super, super fragile. And that actually turned out pretty darn well. I don't think I'm going to get anything much better than that. The side on the left isn't completely flat where the grounds are, and usually that's because you kind of end your circular motion somewhere. Wherever that ends is where the solder clumps up. But this is quite good, actually. I'm pretty happy with this. Let me show this all to you. If the camera will behave here. See that? Nice and flat. And I'll show you all on the microscope as well. And you can see everything's really flat, everything's really separated. The pitch here is quite fine. Maybe over here, I'm gonna do one little pass through. It's a little not super necessary, but I'm gonna do it just in case. And that's why the microscope really helps for checking your work. You can use one of these though to do the same thing. And also helps do both, actually. Of course, if you have the headset, you can do it while you're working as well. You don't have to stop to use the microscope or the magnifying. The beauty of a magnifying headset. So I'm going to use this off camera. And yeah, that looks perfect now. I'm not going to show it. You'll just take my word for it. It looks great. You saw it before. So that's one already done. And let's see. Should I do two at the same time, or should I just go through one? I think for the sake of making this video shorter, I'm just going to do one. And you repeat everything with the second board. It's all the same. Okay, so now that that's all done, I'm going to go ahead and give this one last clean, because you really want it to be quite clean. And like I said, go real slow. Make sure what you want is that when you finish going over this with the alcohol, that there's very little coming up off the Q-tip. And as you can see here, it's not that really dark brown anymore. It's kind of a lighter shade. And yeah, that's quite nice and clean. Ain't no PCB dope as me, just so fresh and so clean. If anybody remembers that old Outkast song. Anyway, you can see there, it looks real nice. I'll go ahead and maybe increase the exposure a bit too. That picks it up a little better maybe. So yeah, that's what you're looking for. So the next step is we need to put this back in our Virtual Boy. The reason will become clear soon, is we have to align the new PCB with the right Y height. This height is very important, and we can't just put this on now and sort of guess if the height's going to be correct. Because if it's off, then our second PCB at 90-degree angle it might not even have enough contacts to solder to. So I do recommend having some bubble wrap so that you don't damage the shell of your Virtual Boy. And I'm going to go ahead and zoom out. And this part's a little tricky. That's not too bad. So what I recommend is loosening the screw here just a little bit for this one. There's of course the two screws that hold on the LED board, which I've got right here. And of course you have to remove those to remove the LED board in the first place. So keep those safe. You're going to need them though. So the first thing you want to do is put the board back in. Now, assuming your holes, these two openings didn't get clogged, these plated vias, it should go down really gently. If they get clogged, what you'll find is these little nubs here. There's one, it's actually mainly this one, and the screw that goes back in. You're going to have some friction there. It's not going to go in easily. And that's the tell sign that you have to clean out those two holes. Now that just went on super easy, so I was expecting that because I didn't actually hit anything there. And let's see, there's actually a little bit of extra stuff in the alcohol that it's not liking. Okay, so give it another little wipe there. All right, so now you get that back in, and we're going to screw this guy on. Then we're going to take this PCB, and the part that's longer over here, which goes on like so, we're going to flip it over and apply a little bit of solder on the bottom. Now you'll see this part here, it says this side LED PCB. It's pretty self-explanatory. This is the side that's going to face the LED PCB. What we're doing is we're applying a little bit of solder on the bottom, the smaller part on the bottom here of the grounds. There's two grounds on each side, which are the strain relief and kind of the mounts of this board, same as the original ribbon cable, but of course this is going to be a lot more solid. Now, next we're going to do is we're going to take our liquid flux, and we are going to put, this part's important, I usually put 3 beads, 3 really thin beads across here. 1, 2, 3. And not below the bottom, not to where it hits the green, just on the actual contacts part. Now I noticed there was a little bit of wiggle room there, which I don't want, so I'm going to screw this down a little bit more. And here is the hardest part of the entire install. This part, I don't envy you folks. It's not the fun part. What we need to do is, so first off, you will see that the bottoms of the PCB here, I have designed very carefully to align with the tops of the black plastic of your Virtual Boy. And that alignment is pretty darn exact. It works out quite well. But the hard part, so I've gotten that vertical height fixed for you by doing the work to getting that alignment vertically. The part that I can't do for you, and this has to do with the limitations of PCB manufacturing, unfortunately, is it's not possible with the way routing tools work for the precision of alignment along the x-axis. You'll see this kind of wiggles a little bit in here, and there's no way to make it 100% perfect. I can explain that really quick why that is. The way a routing bit works is it routes around corners like that, and it's a circular bit. Well, this needs to be a really sharp cut, and it needs to be perfect for this to align in there. Not only that, but there are slight differences sometimes in the plastic, which can also screw with the alignment. So what I've done instead is given you some wiggle room along the x-axis there, but you have to align it. And that is the hardest part of this job. Now, I'm sorry, folks. I wish there was a way around it, but there isn't. And so you apply a little bit of solder on the other side of that ground pad that you connected. And here's the part that is tricky. Now, don't get this too hot. You just want to get a little bit there. And in fact, you should do it when it's on here. You apply solder on both sides of that ground. Then put it on here with the flux underneath it. Now, what you need to do is use your magnifying glass to align these pins as best as you can. And it really has to be close because these are a very, very fine pitch, of course. And when you align them to the best that you can, what we're going to do is we're going to put our soldering iron on this pad. And we're going to hold it there, pushing down gently on this board until it becomes flush on the bottom PCB. And this basically connects just here. When it becomes flush, you'll know that you're doing it right because some of the flux will squeeze out the bottom. That's how you know it's flush. Once we do that, we're going to remove this screw, very carefully take out the board. Don't pull by the new board, but I would recommend using tweezers or something similar to very, very gently pull up from the bottom board and put it on your bench, put it under your microscope, your digital microscope or one of these, and really make sure everything is aligned well before applying all the solder. That'll be the next step, the next major step. So I'm going to go and off camera and see if I can align this. I could try to do it on camera, but it's kind of tricky to get it all on camera at the same time. Maybe I can do it. This is of course one of the things where having a nice LED light like this will become very handy. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the fan since I'm not actually soldering right now. All right. One of the ways to check, by the way, is you have two pads that are connected to each other, here and here, kind of in the middle. And those are good for checking your alignment. At least I've found it useful, but you can use whatever method you like. Okay, that looks pretty good. A little bit. And, you know, don't worry too much if you don't do it. You're probably not going to get it right the first time. And if you do, you can just go back and redo it. And I'll show you how I mean that. So, sorry the camera angle's not the best. But I'm going to go here. I've got it where I like it. Holding the soldering iron down, holding it, holding it, holding it. The gloves are going to insulate some of the heat from your hand too, which is nice. And it's starting to push out that flux from the bottom. and I think it's quite good now. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the iron, hold it for a little bit longer before I let go. Go back here. I'm going to check it again. It looks quite nice. Not bad at all with the handheld magnifying glass, but I have the privilege of having a digital microscope, and this is where that digital microscope really earns its bacon. So I can take something really small like this and triple check it. And you do actually have a margin of error along that axis, but it's a small one. And so having the microscope is a huge help here. So put this under the microscope. Move the camera up so you can see the microscope. And as you can see here, it's actually quite nicely aligned. And what I was talking about before, these two pins are connected. It's one, large pin. They're connected here. It's all one large trace. Those are power and ground traces. So that's a good way to kind of start and see how it looks. And of course, what you want to see is the silver tinned pin on the bottom align with the exposed copper pin on the top. And you want to go across the whole board and make sure everything looks aligned. And this actually looks pretty great. You're not going to get much better than this. I don't think you can get better than this. This looks really good. It's turned out fantastic. But if you have it just a hair off, sometimes it's not the end of the world. And you do have a margin of error. So what you can do in that case, just to show you, if you have a microscope like this, you can pick it up, and sometimes you can actually make out the contacts on the back side of the PCB if you got your microscope like this on full zoom, essentially. You can kind of see it there, but you can see the slight orange here, which is the copper that's actually sitting flush against your tinned pads. Again, pads, traces, same difference in this scenario. Yeah, you can actually see it a lot better here. There's that orange there and there and there and there and there and there. So that's another sort of fail-safe, fail-proof way of checking your work. You can see it there too, all the orange. All right, so once that's done, we go back. And now we're ready to really make this a permanent board install. And that's the hard part. The hard part is over. I guess you could theoretically mess up this part, but it's harder to mess up this part. And so what I do is I put a bead of flux across here, and then sometimes I'll need an extra bead at the bottom, but usually I don't. In this case, I really don't. I'm going to turn the fan back on because I'm definitely going to be needing it. Sorry about the autofocus. So you can see the bead of flux I got across there. What I'm going to do first, though, is I'm going to apply solder and really get this left side flush. And usually what I do is I hold it down and hold the solder there. Give it a couple seconds. You don't have to apply a ton of pressure, just a little bit. And that ensures that, because I've done that on both sides now, that it's really flat. And you can actually turn it this way, sideways like this, and see it's really flush. And it's really on there good. If you don't have it super flush, it'll still work fine. It's just, looks a little better, a little more professional, peace of mind, etc. when you have it really nice and flush like that. So now what we're going to do is we're using the flux and the chisel tip, the flat tip of the iron, to add, and we're going to add solder. And what that's going to do is it's going to feed the solder down the line, essentially, and using the flux under the PCB as well as the flux that we applied on the joint, it's going to heat up the bottom of this PCB really nicely and connect all the traces underneath, because we can't reach them right now. And some people might say, well, use a hot air gun or whatever, but that'll throw off your alignment, first of all. and you risk damaging that LED. So I don't recommend it. This method works quite well, and you will see. So I'm just going to go here, and you'll see the iron's going to move really slowly. And then what I'll do is I'll actually add a little bit of solder to the area on the bottom. I'll add a little bit of solder to the area on the top that matches with it. And then I'll hold it for a second or two, and you'll actually kind of see some of that flux, or not the flux, sorry, you'll see some of that solder disappear underneath, because it's actually flowing underneath the board, which is what we want. And again, don't apply like a ton of pressure. Don't rub against the traces really hard. You don't want to like damage anything. It's pretty durable stuff. I mean, it's hard to do that, but it can be done. You also want to get your iron pretty close to the edge. So it's really, sometimes if you're lucky, you'll actually heat up the tip of the underside of the pads just with your iron so close. And again, when you get close to this hole, you're going to want to lift your iron up a little bit because you don't want to actually add solder into that hole and plate that hole through. And again, I'm going to add a little bit to the top and then heat up the bottom. A little bit to the top, heat up the bottom. The longer you hold it, the better the heat will dissipate too. And this is where the temperature setting is important. Having it at 720 Fahrenheit seems to work wonders for doing this. You know, feel free to do it your own way, but with this iron, it works wonders. And usually after this, at this point it's more or less good, but I'm going to go ahead and give it some extra love because I'm just a perfectionist like that. Let the camera autofocus first. This is also getting pretty hot in my hands, even with the glove. But I'm going to go through, and especially the very end ones I find are the hardest to take up the solder, probably just because of those ground pads. Actually I had a little tiny short there that I fixed just now. And if you find that the solder is clumping up again, just add some more flux and rinse and repeat. All right, that should do it. I'm going to go ahead and use my magnifying glass to check my work. Do this off camera, it's a little bit easier. Looking pretty good. Actually, it looks pretty great. So at that point, you can do this in a different order if you want. I actually prefer to clean it first before checking with a multimeter. And that is the one tool I forgot to mention at the beginning of this video. You do need a multimeter with the very pointy leads that you can get. They're about 10, 12 bucks. And they are necessary for checking your work. The ones with these leads. So you can get these off eBay for like 10 bucks. They're great. I mean, they're absolutely great. Can't recommend them enough. And they're very important for this mod, actually. Turn off the fan since we're not soldering anymore. At least right now. And I'm going to go ahead and apply a little bit of the alcohol here. This Q-tip's kind of falling apart. That's the advantage you get when you use the foam brushes that are more expensive, but it still does the job. This isn't like super sensitive to flux residue or anything, so don't have to worry too much about that. And at this point, what I'm doing this for is, it's kind of nasty when you touch it otherwise, and it's better for your multimeter leads to not get flux on them. It's a lot better for them because then you don't have to clean them later. Easier to clean the PCB now. Alright, and as my camera keeps going out of focus, which is not convenient, you can see it's all nice and clean, and it looks quite ideal on there. That's what you want it to look like. And this part is very important. We got to make sure we check our work, because the last thing you want to do is install a board that's shorted out, shorting pins, or you go through all the work of finishing the mod and then you find out the upgrade and you find out that it's actually not connecting everything. So let's see. That's our ground pad. This is actually not connected to anything except these isolated pads, which they don't actually connect to the circuit. So don't worry too much about that. It's more of a strain relief for the ribbon cable. But since we're using this board, it's more than adequate strain relief. So let's see if we got this guy going. And I'm not hearing anything, so that's not great. And of course, as long as the alignment's right, you just have to go back and add a little more flux and solder. It's not the end of the world. Yeah, we're not getting a connection there. Okay, so number 1, we have no connection. We'll have to go fix that. Let's see, number 2. That's good. And then you move, the important thing is you move on to the next one while still holding on to the previous one. And that lets you know there's not a short. Very important. It's called walking it down when you're testing a circuit like this. All right, that one's good. Next one, no short. Good. Next one, no short. Good. And it's tedious, but you just keep going. There's 32 of these or 30 of these? 30 of them, yeah. All right. All right. And we'll keep going. And of course, that one's going to be fine. Now, very important note, folks. This is the only time this occurs. So if you're going from left to right, this is the furthest left. From left to right, the first double pin segment you get, the one next to it is actually shorted to it. So you'll see that both of those are shorted. That is supposed to be that way, only on this one section. So make a big note of that. Otherwise you'll drive yourself bonkers thinking something's shorted by accident, but it's supposed to be that way. So next one's fine, fine. And that one's not shorted, good. That one is good. Just walking it down, cool, cool, good. All right. All right, and then the ground one, which doesn't really matter. So that means the only one that is not connected is pin 1, which, as I was saying, if you remember, the pins on the very end can be the hardest to get a connection on because they're near the ground pad. Yeah, that's the only one. So that's not too bad. I'll just have to solder that one little area. And go back here, turn the fans back on. I'm going to hold the iron on the top there a little bit longer just to make sure it really takes to that. All right, that should do it. Let me just make sure nothing's shorted there. Yeah, that looks good. Double check with my magnifying glass. Looking quite good. Let's take my leads here. I'm not going to clean it, even though it's going to dirty my lead a little bit. I just want to know before I flux it again. And I got it. Pin 1 is now fine. Let's get the fans back off. Get a little alcohol on there. So like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect every time. If you need to go back and fix something, you can. The nice thing about this not being an actual ribbon cable you're soldering is this board is very durable. It can be desoldered and resoldered a number of times. It's an Osh Park board, so those are good quality. It's not like a cheapo board that you have to worry about it falling apart or something. And go ahead and give this one more rub down. All right, let's put this under the microscope just so you can see what it all looks like again. And yeah, why not triple check since we're under the microscope here. Pin 1. Cool. Next to it? Nope. And does it connect to the ground? Nope. Got a little bit of, you'll see now I have a little bit of flux stuff on my leads, which is what happens when you put leads over flux, of course. So yeah, we're good to go. All right. Whew. Take a breath. Take a break if you need to, before we move on to step 2. Major step 2. I guess there's a bunch of little steps in here. But now we're going to attach the second PCB. And I cannot find one that I haven't already prepackaged for people that doesn't have the connector on already. But the connector is, it's pretty straightforward. It's just a flat flex cable connector, and you're going to use drag soldering in the same way we did on this PCB. Let's go ahead and move this down and zoom in so I can show you what I mean. So if we pretend that this is my soldering iron, you put a bead of solder across. Well, first you put a little bit of solder. I'll usually start with one of the mounts here. So I'll solder that one little mount, make sure everything's aligned. I went to the work of putting this silk square here around the connector so you can make sure it fits in that nicely. And once everything's aligned really well and you have a little solder mount holding it in place, you can put a bead of solder across. And if you pretend this is a chisel tip soldering iron, you just go like that across the whole thing and drag solder it and clean it up when you're done. So I have that pre-prepared. That's the only thing I'm not going to show you in this video, but like I said, it's really similar to what I just showed you. And if you don't know how to drag solder by now, or if you don't know how to install one of these connectors, you really shouldn't be doing this install anyway. So next part is we're going to go back to our Virtual Boy unit, our head unit here. And now we can put the PCB back in. And we're going to put the screw back in. Like I said, we're going to be using that screw. Get our little driver. All right, so that's all secured. And so now we're going to take our add-on board and we have to solder it to the first one that we just installed. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here, give you a better shot of it all. What's nice about this is I designed it so that this can rest on the plastic. And this is why I spent so long designing this thing, is because it really does match the Virtual Boy very, very nicely. Turn the fans back on, and I'm going to do like I did before, which is I'm going to start with just a solder mount, put a little bit of solder over here on the ground to get it aligned first. You don't need a chisel tip for this part, but I don't feel like firing up my other iron, so I'm just going to use the chisel tip. And let's see. Make sure it's all aligned. Sorry, you can't really see, can you? I'm just holding it with my middle finger, pushing down on the PCB to keep it in place, and then my index finger and my thumb are holding the solder. Alright, so I've got that mounted in there, and now that that's in there, and if you want, you can really make sure this is flat. Boy, this autofocus is not my friend today. Alright. And the alignment looks... let's do a little better. This is a larger pitch, so the alignment's not nearly as hard as the one we just did. Alright, and now I do the other side. So now this is all snugly on there. It's very sturdy. And now we're ready to drag solder it. This part's kind of fun. It's pretty easy. Just put a bead of solder, or sorry, flux. Put a bead of flux across the joint here. Make this a little bit larger bead since we're doing a larger pitch with more copper. Take our solder, take our chisel tip, go in here. We're just gonna move it across slowly, applying a little bit of solder where we see the pad, the copper is still exposed. And you want to get everything, of course, that silvery, soldery tin color that we love so much. Alright, so now that we've got that all soldered nicely, we can do one little double checking here. The corners, the ones on the edges are always the trickier ones, but this looks pretty good. I don't see any problem ones. And this one, because you have more material to work with, it works out pretty well each time. Okay. I actually just was able to eyeball that without a magnifying glass. And then I'm just going to clean it with the alcohol like we've been doing all along. And now we're ready to put the new ribbon cable in. Getting towards the finish line, folks. So for the ribbon cable, it can be a little bit finicky. It's not too bad, but you want to make sure there's a little bit of space. You can see a little bit of the grayish black plastic on the inside right and the inside left. So that lets you know you're getting the center of it. Pull the lip down and you'll find this blue part will always be a little bit slanty, usually. Just because of the mating mechanism, the way it's set up. It's not like the most perfect snug fit ever, but it does the job. So then we get our connector into the Virtual Boy, or our ribbon into the Virtual Boy connector, to be more precise. And now we'll take our multimeter leads again. We'll go to the very last pin on the left. Got connection. The one next to it, nope. But then we walk it over. And yep, we got that. Do the same on the right. Let's see my not getting a connection, so that means I seated the cable wrong. And that's why we check our work. Alright, yeah, that's in there a lot better now. Let's try this again. Sometimes you have to clean your lead tips if you got some flux on them too. So I'm getting it there. Ah, there we go. I was touching the silk. Alright. All right. It's benefits of doing this with a magnifying headset, which I'm not using because I'm doing this all on camera. Trying to keep my distance of my head out of the frame. And again, all right, so we know that 1 and 2 on both sides are connected to the connector without shorts, which is a fair guess that everything in the middle is going to be fine. Now, for you all out there, I would really recommend doing each pin all over again. But I've done a lot of these installs, and so I'm not going to do that. I'm pretty confident this should be fine. And I'll test it out. Should be ready to go. All right, so here we are with Virtual Tennis inserted into the Virtual Boy. Virtual Tennis, or Mario Tennis. Mario's Tennis. Nobody else owns tennis, just Mario. Put our power plug in there. And I've only got the one side connected. And I've got the tape over the thing too, which I'm not going to take off just yet because I don't think we need to. But I'm just going to do a quick test and see what we have. And look at that. So when I use my eyeball, it looks perfect, but on the cell phone camera, it is not happy. But let's see if I can get it a little better. Well, maybe if I turn off the light, that'll help. But everything's good. I know the speaker's connected, so you can't hear the sound. But since my camera's not picking up, you'll have to take my word for it. It is a fully working display. And it is now, yeah, doing great. Use my eyeball here. Yep, everything looks good. So, the very last thing you can do, which is optional, but I think it's a good thing to do, zoom out here, is you can tuck this ribbon cable in the space. There's actually a little space. Let's see if I can grab my tweezers to show right in here. There's actually some extra space, and it just works out perfect for the excess ribbon cable that's sticking out. Now, if you don't do this, your excess ribbon cable is just going to slide up and down the bottom plastic of your Virtual Boy case. Hardly the end of the world. It's a very durable ribbon cable. Unlike the OEM one, it's really not going to be bothered by that. But I think this looks nicer, and it's just kind of that last little extra step that I like to do, just to give it that nice look. And I think it actually has a little bit less strain on the cable as well. And so there you go. It's all just tucked neatly in there. It's not being compacted or anything because there's that little bit of headroom. They made the extra space because you're sliding this piece back and forth. So it's meant to be there. And now when we turn it, you'll see, look at that, no strain on anything. It is incredibly durable. The idea of this modification, this upgrade, is that you will never have to worry about this ever again. Ever, ever. I mean, it's just super solid. And so now if you want to install a virtual tap or something like that, you're totally fine. You don't have to worry about anything bending or pushing and breaking the connection later. It's quite an upgrade over the current different types of solutions out there. So I hope this video is useful for all of you brave enough to attempt your own install. And I know there's a number of people have contacted me that are going to be willing to do installations for folks. I might still do some of them, but as you can see, it is a bit of a time suck. So you know, it does cost extra. And you have to do this twice, right? Because you have to do this for the left side and then the right side. Got to do all those steps I just showed you for that side as well. So, you know, it is a kind of a lengthy install, and it does require, of course, the extra tools that I showed you. But yeah, that's the Virtual Ribbon, folks, and I'm super proud of it. I think it's, you know, it's not the easiest install, like I've been saying, but if you can get someone else to do it, it is by and far the best solution available for fixing your Virtual Boy LEDs, your LED PCBs, making this guy last a long time so you can explore virtual reality. Well, that's it for this video. If you want to order one, you can go to my website. I'll have the link below, and you can order the kit where you can install yourself with the instructions I just showed you here, or like I said, I might still be doing some installs depending on when you're watching this video. And these are going out of stock pretty quickly, but I'm doing another batch soon, and feel free to spread the word, tell your friends, all that sort of thing. And I'll be designing more PCBs for other systems later as well, because that's what I do. This is Segasonicfan, signing out.